Hey, it's Nancy. Before we begin today, I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Crime Beat early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. In September of 1995, Bill Vomastic's family should have been celebrating his 68th birthday. Instead, they frantically searched for him. The beloved father and grandfather hadn't been seen in weeks.
I had posters made up that we distributed all throughout southern Alberta. The television coverage died down, and I wanted to keep it alive.
I'm Nancy Hixt, a senior crime reporter for Global News. Today on Crime Beat, I share how investigators finally connected two violent deaths and the shocking events that unfolded long after the court cases were over. This is the conclusion of Golden Years Gone. On August 24th, 1995, Bill Vomastic was spending time with his son when a man showed up at his house unannounced. The next day, he vanished. His daughter and son noticed alcohol and guns were missing from his home, along with his car. More shocking was the discovery of blood in his study. That was the starting point of a police investigation. Not long after, Bill's vehicle was spotted by patrol officers. They attempted a traffic stop, but the driver took off. Raymond Tudor was apprehended a short distance away. Tudor is the same man who the RCMP were looking at for the murder of Artie Turner that happened more than a year earlier in RCMP jurisdiction. Calgary Police Detective Cal Johnston said all evidence pointed to Tudor for the disappearance of Bill Vomastic as well.
You look me in the eye and you tell me again that you didn't kill Bill.
I didn't kill Bill.
You can help the family by putting Bill's body to rest and letting them have a service. Now, you can sit here stubborn. I'm still locking you up. You are being locked up, no joke, tonight. You can sit here, and you can make us look, and we'll look for a day, we'll look for 3 years. But we'll find them. And then at that point in time, in my eyes, you'll be the coldest-blooded son of a bitch I've ever met.
Though Bill Vomastic's body had not been located, police charged Tudor with second-degree murder. The break in the missing persons case led local newscasts that night, and that's what spurred a break in the RCMP investigation into the cold case murder. You'll recall investigators believed there was a possible witness to Artie Turner's killing. A man had called both the RCMP as well as Artie's neighbor, Len Moore, claiming he had information about the homicide, and he would tell police in exchange for information about how Artie had been killed. Artie had been bludgeoned to death, but that information was kept as holdback evidence in the case, meaning it was information that only the killer and investigators knew. Police hoped that eventually the caller would do the right thing and come forward.
I phoned you tonight because, I was watching TV on Channel 4 and I saw that the Calgary police have arrested a guy who I think I know, who I in fact think perpetrated the murder out at Langdon.
It turned out, seeing the news that Raymond Tudor had allegedly killed another man was this witness's breaking point.
My name is Nolan Dodd. I'm giving information voluntarily here because I believe I know something about a murder that happened out at Langdon. I saw that Calgary police had arrested a Raymond John Tudor.
Yeah.
They said it was a Calgary man and charged him with second-degree murder for some 68-year-old guy named Vomastic. Okay. I believe the same guy is responsible for the murder out at Langdon.
Okay. Now, what brings us
What brings those two together for you?
Well, because of the night of the murder out at Langdon, the fellow's name that I drove out there was also Raymond Tudor.
As you'll remember, it was the spring of 1994 when Len Moore stopped in to see his neighbor, only to find Artie's car was gone and his friend was dead, lying in a pool of blood. As officers dug into Raymond Tudor's background, they realized he lived very close to where Artie's El Camino had been spotted just hours after the murder. RCMP Corporal Doug Morrison said suspicion grew despite Tudor's denials of any involvement.
I always thought that maybe he thought he was way smarter than the police. So that, because the RCMP had been looking at him, he's outsmarted us. So, like he'd go into his apartment wearing one thing, come out with a trench coat on and a cowboy hat, and figuring that nobody would recognize him now. Like he's playing games with us. So, that's the kind of a bad guy he is.
The eyewitness was interviewed by the RCMP. He said he met Tudor by chance at a Calgary pizza place a few years earlier.
I was sitting at the bar, and at the time I was really bummed out because I'd been arrested for cultivating pot. And I have to be, and involved in this deal was the fact that I had a handgun and I had an FAC that expired. And I was pretty sure I had to get rid of the handgun. I was afraid of facing more charges because I was being I thought I was being investigated for growing pot, and I didn't want them to all of a sudden show up at the door and say, hey, you don't have an FAC for your handgun.
Just for clarification, an FAC is a firearms acquisition license, basically a firearms permit. Here's Corporal Morrison to help fill in the blanks.
Well, he had a gun that he had purchased, but his FAC permit had expired because of his criminal record, and he couldn't get a new FAC, so he had to get rid of the gun.
Mr. Tudor overheard me talking about this. I can't remember who I was talking to, but I wasn't talking to him at the time. And he piped up and he said he was a gun collector. And then if the gun was any good, he would give me a fair price for it.
He sold it to Raymond John Tudor for $650. That would have been about 1992. So then as the story goes, Nolan Dodd gets convicted of cultivation of marijuana. He gets sentenced to a month in jail, and he ends up being in Calgary Correctional Center, the provincial. And he went in there in November of 93. In December the 22nd, I believe, he's released. He's done his time.
At that same time, Tudor was convicted of weapons offenses and forcible confinement. Court documents confirm that Dodd and Raymond Tudor served time together in the north wing of the Calgary Correctional Center from November 18, 1993 until December 22, 1993. Once they were both free, Dodd said Tudor had paid him to drive him east of the city several times, including the night of April 29, 1994.
He phoned me up to pick him up here and to give him a ride to visit his family down in Carsland. Looking back now, I would say he was dressed for a break-in. That night. See, because I was just afraid that it was going to be my word against his word. Right. And I don't have an alibi for that night. I drove the guy out, dropped him off alongside the road. Then I went back to Ogden. I had $3 in my pocket, or $4, I think it was. I bought one drink at that, we drove past it. There's a bar on Ogden Road. I had one drink in that Ogden bar, and then I went home. I was home at 11:30 that night.
Did you see him again over the next couple of days after this?
Yeah, a few days later. I didn't even hear about the murder until we more or less went back in Calgary, eh?
Okay.
And then I was watching TV, I don't know about it. It was either before noon or afternoon.
Right.
and or it was TV. No, I think it was the radio. I think I was listening to the radio, and there was something about, well, they mentioned that there was a murder out at Langdon. Then a couple of days later, we were having drinks at the Glenmore Inn, and I just plain came right out and asked him, "Did you do it?"
Right.
And he said that I didn't want to know. Oh, I didn't want to know what happened out there, because then it would involve me and my family. Then he was kind of silent for a while, and then he said we had to move because there was a guy sitting too close beside us. So we moved out of the patio sort of part, sunroof sort of part, inside.
Right.
And then when we sat down inside, he just basically said if he killed once to avoid going back to jail, he'd have no problem killing again.
At long last, police finally understood why the witness had hesitated in coming forward. He was worried Artie had been shot with his old gun, and that if he told anyone, he would be next. But after seeing that Tudor had been charged with another murder, Dodd could no longer remain silent.
So now he said, geez, he's killed two old guys. I better get this off my chest here, because he could kill me and my mom.
The following day, Nolan Dodd drove with Corporal Morrison to the Langdon area and described in a video and audio recorded statement where he had taken Raymond Tudor the night of Artie Turner's murder.
This is the golden witness, yeah. Because we could never figure out how would Tudor get out there, because he, unless he had another guy with him that was part and parcel of the murder. Did he ride a bike out there and then threw the bike in the back of Artie's vehicle and brought that back? Did he walk out there and then had to steal the vehicle? He filled in the whole story. Well, we have a dead body. He was beat to death. He was robbed. His vehicle was stolen. We have the vehicle parked in the vicinity of the Alyth Lodge. He could have got out of that, parked that vehicle, and then just walked down the railroad tracks, which run right past the Glenmore Inn and right down to the Alyth Lodge. And that's probably the way he went at 2:00 in the morning. And then now we've got him sitting in his number 4 apartment at the Alyth thing. He could look right at the Glenmore Inn and see the vehicle there, some 300, 400 yards away. Then the vehicle is gone. It's left because now there's a news bulletin that we're looking for this vehicle. Now it's left in the Sears parking lot of Chinook Center. And now we have the rest of the story, how he got out there, what they did out there.
As the RCMP finalized their case against Tudor for the murder of Artie Turner, Deputy Chief Cliff O'Brien said there was a new development in the investigation into Bill Vomastic's homicide by Calgary police.
We had a break on September 2nd, and that's when somebody that lives just east of Calgary, just outside city limits, located what appeared to be some blood-stained shower curtains and a rod, and called the RCMP. Unfortunately, the RCMP officer that attended contacted the Calgary Police Service, and we were able to realize that there was, in fact, a shower curtain and a shower rod that was missing from the victim's house, and this description matched.
But a search of the area for Bill's remains came up empty.
We realized the scope of our search needed to really expand, and so we did send people out to that ditch, like into that area just outside Calgary, and did a thorough search out there. If you don't search, you'll never find it. And so we searched, we did not find anything else, but again, if you don't search it, you'll never know.
Then, on September 22nd, 1995, 4 weeks after Bill Vomastic disappeared, 2 pheasant hunters were out on a rural property near Carsland when they came across a body. Carsland is a small hamlet. It's been mentioned a few times throughout this story. It's located on Canadian Pacific's Calgary to Saskatoon rail line. And it's Raymond Tudor's hometown. When Calgary police homicide detectives arrived at the scene, located about an hour's drive southeast of Bill's home, they confirmed it was in fact the missing senior. Bill's daughter, Sharon Bevins, had shared a detail from a motorcycle crash he suffered in his 20s that made his identity indisputable.
And you could actually see the nuts and bolts, like through his skin. So when his body was found, I remember the detectives phoning me and saying, hey, we found this body out by Carsland. And I said, well, did you find a pile of nuts and bolts? Because if you did, it's him. So we knew right away.
The exact spot where Bill's body was found is 17 kilometers south of Carsland, and it's very much off the beaten path, out by an old abandoned barn. The barn isn't there anymore, but as my photographer and I pored over court documents and photo exhibits from the case, we realized that we had been to this exact spot before. The old barn was really unique and was a beautiful backdrop for some photos we had taken in 2013. And back in 1995, the beauty of the area was not lost on the detectives either. Here again is Deputy Chief Cliff O'Brien.
The investigators took the time to take a really beautiful sunset photograph from the place that Bill was located. And, you know, it's heartfelt. It's the investigators trying to provide closure to the family. It was just something that was pretty impactful to us. Yeah, I just thought it was very kind what they did and super impactful.
Bill's daughter, Sharon Bevins, still has the photo the officers took for her that day.
They took pictures of the scene and they said, this is, you know, your dad's view every day. And it was actually beautiful, but yeah.
But any sense of peace was short-lived. The medical examiner revealed what family and police had suspected. Bill had suffered a horrific end.
The autopsy report gave me answers, 7 stab wounds into the back, violent wounds which busted rib bones, and they figured that Dad was bent over, I think putting a record on or something, when Tudor came up behind him and just started stabbing him. It was very traumatic. I think when it was all said and done, I don't think there was a whole lot of relief. I think it was just traumatic. That's all I can say.
And all for nothing more than a few $100s.
He figured that he was smart, and he would pick on pensioners and people that were older and weaker. He would wait till the end of the month to murder them once they had their pension checks, right? And I mean, Dad was bad for that. I said, there are debit cards, Dad, because he would get his pension checks and he would go to the bank and get all his money and put it in his wallet. Well, he had a stack of money, I don't know, probably $1,000 that he would tote around with him. And I think he figured that he had got away with Artie's. So do it again, right? That was easy.
In December of 1995, about a year and a half after Artie Turner was killed, RCMP Corporal Doug Morrison paid Raymond Tudor a visit at the Calgary Remand Centre. He was there awaiting trial on the murder of Bill Vamastic.
Actually, just this morning, I received a call from a fellow by the name of Mr. Dodd. He told me that he had, in fact, dropped you off at Artie Turner's place, or very close to Artie Turner's place, on the evening prior to his death. Now, that's contrary to what the I don't even know the guy. You don't know Mr. Dodd? I know we know the guy in the grave. You should probably talk to my lawyer too.
Corporal Morrison said Tudor was charged with the second-degree murder of Artie Turner, which was later upgraded to first-degree murder.
Because our case went so long, our investigation went so long, I think he figured that he was smart enough to beat the system.
Raymond Tudor faced a series of trials. In June of 1997, a jury convicted him of the first-degree murder of Artie Turner. But he appealed that conviction. The Alberta Court of Appeal deemed that an error was made in the original instructions to the jury. A retrial was ordered. That would take place a few years later. Next, a separate trial was held for the murder of Bill the Mastic. In December of 1997, Tudor was found guilty of second-degree murder in that case and sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 20 years. Then, in June of 2000, the retrial was held for the death of Artie Turner. This time, a judge found Tudor guilty of the lesser charge of second-degree murder and sentenced him to life in prison with no chance of parole for 20 years. Bill the Mastic's daughter said the trials and appeals felt long and drawn out, and throughout the proceedings, she said Tudor showed no remorse. But just when the loved ones of the two victims thought the cases were finally closed, there was an unexpected, high-profile development. Less than 2 years into his prison sentence, Raymond Tudor disappeared from Drumheller Institution.
Raymond Tudor shouldn't be hard to spot unless he has shaved off his beard and hair. This is the first escape from the medium security part of the institution since 1994, and prison officials still aren't sure how he got out.
On March 26, 2002, a Canada-wide warrant was issued, and a manhunt began. The convicted double murderer was even featured on the popular TV show America's Most Wanted.
There's been a lot of speculation about, like, did he walk out the front gate or did he climb a fence? We don't really know. We do know that the fence alarms were working at that time. For him to come out through any other way, you would have had to go through 2 checkpoints with correctional officers there checking people. It seems very unlikely. But we can't rule out anything right now.
Artie Turner's friends and loved ones, including Len Moore, were warned that Tudor was on the loose.
I was MP in Strathmore, came down to my work, called me up to the office, to the front, and they said, yes, we have some bad news. Raymond Tudor escaped Drumheller jail, and we don't know where he is. So this is just a word of caution to you and your family and your friends to be alert. Yeah, it makes you wonder. There's a lot of restless nights.
Bill the Mastic's daughter, Sharon Bevan, said her family received similar warnings from police.
Well, he did apparently have a hit list that he left in his jail cell. The prosecutor was on it. I was on it. It was quite a lengthy list of people that he was going to get rid of. I remember reading the paper one morning, and it said that he'd been spotted by Edworthy Park. That was reported in the Calgary Sun, that someone had thought they spotted him that when he'd escaped from jail. And I was terrified because it was right down the hill from where we lived. So I phoned the detectives, and they sent police cars to circle the house, every so many hours. They told me to go and take a different route to and from work. And even with my son, I'd tell him, when you get home from school, you lock the door, you don't answer the door. Anybody comes, just don't. Phone me, and I'll deal with it, but don't answer the door. Don't let anyone in.
Tudor disappeared for 7 weeks, but he hadn't gone far. It turned out the 48-year-old had been hiding in the prison's duct system and in the walls of the institution's workshop. Here's the former prison warden, Floyd Wilson.
This is a hole he created in the wall. You see from the size of it. It's not a very large hole, approximately 12 inches square to something to that extent. He was able to slide through there.
Officials believed other inmates had helped Tudor, as he had a box of cookies with him when he was found. But by then, he had lost 40 pounds. I confirmed with the Correctional Service of Canada that following his attempted escape, there was a board of investigation that looked into the incident. Unfortunately, the results of that investigation aren't public. More than 20 years later, Raymond Tudor remains in prison. A written decision from the Parole Board of Canada in 2021 gave me a deeper glimpse into Tudor's background. You'll recall he had previous convictions for weapons offenses and forcible confinement in 1992 that led him to serve time at a provincial jail in Calgary, where he met the star witness in R.D. Turner's case. Well, according to the parole board, he held his former wife, child, and mother-in-law at gunpoint for several hours before surrendering to police. The board said Tudor had been found to be predatory and conniving, manipulating the innocent in order to fulfill his perverse needs. The board also went over a significant history of attempting to escape custody, and that high-profile incident that resulted in a 40-day manhunt wasn't his first try. Parole board documents show that after his arrest, but before Tudor stood trial, while undergoing a psychiatric assessment in hospital, his then-girlfriend brought him several items to be used in an escape, including hacksaw blades, a knife, pliers, a file, crazy glue, a chisel, and a flashlight. However, that plan was foiled when another inmate told authorities. Tudor disclosed another escape plan to an undercover police officer. In that case, he had hoped to stage a medical emergency, and once he was taken to the hospital, he planned to make a run for it. Sharon Bevins told me she remembers that incident very clearly.
I got a phone call one night that he had been injured in the remand center. Someone had stabbed him. They weren't sure at the time, but he was taken to the general hospital for treatment of his injuries. And what he had done, unbelievably, was taken bed sheets and tied them together. And he was heading out the window of the general when they caught him. But they figured that he had stabbed himself to make it look like I mean, that's the kind of brain you're dealing with, right?
The parole board also detailed Tudor's final vanishing act in 2002. He was charged with attempting to escape lawful custody and being unlawfully at large. These charges were later stayed. Following that incident, Tudor spent approximately 3 years in maximum security before being transferred back to medium security in 2005. Since then, he's completed several programs for violence and has been assessed as emotionally stable, with a moderate to high risk of violent reoffending. According to the board, he lives in dormitory housing and spends his spare time playing cards, watching TV, and visiting with other offenders. Officials note his attitude needs improving, and he's been encouraged to attend AA meetings. The parole board said Tudor is employed with prison housekeeping and has expressed interest in obtaining employment in a trusted position in the institution, such as a front entrance cleaner or in other areas occupied by staff. Tudor was denied all parole. The board said releasing him would present an undue risk to society. though he claims he has no interest in parole, suggesting he would instead be moved to a minimum security facility. Tudor told the board he's estranged from his family and has no contact with anyone outside of prison. Sharon Bevins said she's received notice that Tudor's next parole hearing is scheduled for 2026.
I think when I spoke to the parole board before, I wanted them to be able to put a face and a personality to my dad, that he wasn't just the victim. He was actually a person that meant a lot to us. You know, I explained how my brother is traumatized, how I am traumatized, how our son is traumatized, how it destroyed our lives, really. And that was all I could say.
Sharon told me she hopes Tudor never gets out.
I just think he would probably do somebody else in. That's my fear. You don't know what he's going to do.
That sentiment has been echoed by Tudor's own relatives, who I spoke to as I put together this podcast. Those family members of Tudor's are also victims in this case. Artie Turner was like a grandfather to them. In fact, some of their photos were in his wallet when it was recovered by police, and I saw those photos in the court exhibits. Decades later, Sharon Bevins and Len Moore still struggle with the senseless murders.
And I mean, even to this day, I can't dream about them. I can't think about them. I can't picture what they look like, what their voices sound like. It must be trauma, I guess.
And why? For nothing. Jeez. Car ride and a murder. $200, $400, whatever.
Len thinks of Artie every time he drives by his friend's place.
I don't know. I miss him.
Well, what's your favorite memory of Artie?
Oh, just his laugh.
In Sharon's home, there are a lot of her father's treasures, including the replica of the old Napoleon cannon he had built. They're mementos she holds on to tightly because she didn't have the chance to hold on to him. What do you miss the most about your dad?
I think the relationship that we had, I mean, we became very, very close in later years, you know, when he had retired, and he had a wicked sense of humor. He was a funny, funny guy. And I'm glad that we can focus on Dad and who he was. I think it's important.
I want to thank Sharon Bevins and Len Moore, along with the RCMP and CPS officers who helped me put this story together. And thank you for listening. Crime Beat is written and produced by me, Nancy Hixt, with senior producer Dila Velasquez. Audio editing and sound design is by Rob Johnston. Special thanks to photographer-editor Danny Lantella for his work on this episode. And thanks to Chris Bassett, the VP of Network Content Production and Distribution and Editorial Standards for Global News. I would love to have you tell a friend about this podcast. There are 7 seasons of stories you can listen to and share. And please consider rating and reviewing Crime Beat on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You can find me on Facebook at Nancy Hixt Crime Beat and on Instagram at nancy.hixt. That's Hixt. Thanks again for listening. Please join me next time.